Hi everyone, welcome to the Your Frightful Teacher Science webinar. I'm Steph Corbett, I'm the main science teacher here at Your Favourite Teacher, and I'm going to be taking you through this webinar today. And we're going to be focusing on blood vessels and the blood. So by the end of this webinar, you should be able to describe the role and structures of the arteries, veins and capillaries, and you should be able to describe the components, that's the things that make up the blood and their roles in the blood. So we're going to start first with the three main types of blood vessels. So we're going to look at arteries first. So arteries carry blood away from the heart, and I've underlined the A on the arteries and the A on the way. That's how you can remember it. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Some people say that arteries carry oxygenated blood, so that's blood that's got lots of oxygen in it, and that's a common misconception. Most arteries do carry blood with oxygenated blood in, but there's an artery that goes from the heart to the lungs that carries deoxygenated blood, so that's blood without any oxygen in. So then that blood can go to the lungs and it can collect oxygen from the lungs. That blood will then go back to the heart and then go back around the body. So you have to be really careful. Most of the time, blood in arteries is oxygenated, but not always. So you're safer to say arteries carry blood away from the heart. This blood is also at really high pressure. The arteries are the closest blood vessel essentially to the heart. So the heart's just pumped and is forced all that blood out of the heart. So it's at a really high pressure, it's squirting through the arteries. And that's really important. It helps blood get where it's needed quicker. And because that blood is at really high pressure, arteries have to have thick elastic walls, essentially so the arteries don't pop, because the blood is at such high pressure. You don't want that blood to burst an artery. That would obviously be really, really bad. So the arteries have really thick elastic walls. And actually you can feel the fact that the walls are elastic. So if you take your pulse, so like up using two fingers in your neck or on your wrist, and you feel your pulse, you can feel the beat. That is the elastic walls of your arteries. So every time your heart beats and it forces the next lot of blood through the arteries expand slightly to let that blood through and then recoil and they go back. And that's what you feel every time you feel that do, 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 as you're feeling a pulse, the elastic walls. They also have something called a small lumen. So if you see the word lumen, that's basically just the hole in the middle of a tube. You probably wouldn't have heard it in the digestive system, but you might have. But yeah, lumen just means the hole in the middle. And in the case of an artery, that hole is quite small. Again, that helps maintain the pressure of the blood. If you think about, say you've got water trickling out the end of the hose and you want to squirt someone further away, then you would put your thumb over the end of that hose and you would make the hole smaller. That's going to increase the pressure so the water shoots out further and gets the person you're trying to get. Now arteries is the same. They have a thin, small lumen to keep that pressure of the blood high, again, so the blood can get where it's going quickly, and maybe your muscle cells can get nice lots of oxygen, all the nutrients are traveling around nice and quickly. So key things are arteries carry blood away from the heart at high pressure. They have a thick elastic wall and a small lumen. Next, we're going to look at veins. So veins carry blood back to the heart. So the arteries deliver it around the body. We then have something called a capillary where the exchange happens. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the veins bring all that blood back to the heart. So it can go then back to the lungs and pick up some more oxygen and then go back around the body. And because the blood has now been all around the body, if you think again about a hose, if you have a really long hose, the pressure of the water is going to decrease as your hose gets longer and longer. And that's exactly the same with the blood vessels. So the blood traveling in the veins is at a low pressure, it's traveling quite slowly. And because of this, veins can have quite thin walls because the blood's not going to burst out. And they have quite a large lumen, so that large hole down the middle, again, just to allow that blood to flow through. They have something that arteries don't have, and they have valves. So valves basically close if blood tries to flow the wrong way. So if you think about your arm, if I put my arm up, all the blood's going to run down my arm back to my heart. Perfect. Down the veins, obviously. Pressure's low, gravity's going to do its work, blood's going to come back down. If I put my arm down, then now the blood has to go back against gravity. So that some of that blood might flow back down towards my hand. Obviously, that's not great if all the blood collects in the bottom of your hand, because then it can't get pumped back by the heart through the arteries. So these valves, if blood tries to flow the wrong way, the valves automatically shut and it stops any blood going back through. As soon as blood starts flowing in the right direction again, the valves open and the blood will start to flow through. So that's the main structural differences between arteries and veins. Veins have thin walls and they have a large lumen, so that's completely the opposite to an artery. And they also have valves to stop backflow. That's blood flowing backwards in the wrong direction. The last type of blood vessel are capillaries. So capillaries are the go-between between an artery and a vein, and they're the site of exchange. So they're really, really important. The whole point of having blood and blood being pumped around the body is so that the blood can deliver things. It can deliver oxygen, nutrients, it can take away waste. And where the blood gives out all that good stuff and takes in all the bad stuff is in the capillaries. That's what we mean by the site of exchange. They're exchanging the good nutrients and taking in any sort of bad waste products. They are very, very thin and highly branched. So an artery will have maybe one artery going to a main area, and that artery will split like the root of trees into hundreds and hundreds of different capillaries. And the reason it happens is so the capillaries can get close to all the different cells. And they have to be really thin because there's only so much blood in your body. So the blood needs to split down all these capillaries, and there obviously needs to be room for whatever tissue. Say it's a leg muscle, you don't want your whole leg muscle being taken up by big arteries, so we have lots of thin capillaries going through that muscle. And the walls of capillaries are only 1 cell thick. They're really, really, really thin, and that's to allow the, as I say, all the nutrients, the good stuff, the oxygen to come out, and all the waste products to diffuse in. If you had a really thick wall, you wouldn't be able to get anything in and out of the blood. It's like a tea bag. The walls of the tea bag are really thin to let the tea flavour out. If you had tea in a plastic bag and then you put that into a cup, you're not going to make a cup of tea. That's exactly like arteries and veins. So arteries and veins, because they've got those thicker walls, things can't get in and out. So yeah, capillaries only 1 cell thick for allowing diffusion to allow exchange. The capillaries themselves, as I said, they're very, very thin. They actually can only fit 1 blood cell at a time down the capillary. So their lumen, the hole in the middle, is really, really, really tiny in comparison to arteries and veins. So you're going to need something to write on now, a piece of paper, a device, whatever it is. So you're going to make some notes. What you're going to do is you're going to compare our 3 types of blood vessels. We're going to have all the information we need on this nice table. So you don't need to write very much at all. When I show you my answers, you'll see it's only a few words. in each box. So you're going to compare the blood pressure in an artery, vein, capillary, the direction of the blood flow. Where's it going? The size of the lumen, that's the hole in the middle. What are the walls like? Are there any valves present? And then obviously, because it's Halloween, we're having a Halloween theme here at Your Frightful Teacher. I want you to have a think about, and obviously this isn't going to be on an exam, but think about, do you think that blood vessel would be good for a vampire to feed from? And most importantly, why do you think that? There's no real right or wrong answer here. It's a good way to get you thinking about those different types of blood vessels, what the blood's like in each one, and then obviously whatever you think a vampire needs. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to get going with that. Don't panic too much. If you have to leave any gaps, we will go through the answers afterwards. And as I say, don't write loads in your boxes. Just a really brief description. So you've got a nice table comparing the 3 vessels, and all the information you need is at one place. If you're doing this for revision and you don't want is it good for vampire feeding on the bottom, then obviously you can leave that off, but definitely worth having a think about. So you're just over halfway through your time. Right, so we're going to go through the answers. If you've got any gaps, then you can add to it now, or if there's anything incorrect on your table, then make sure you correct it. So, as I say, you can use this for revision. So here we go. Arteries carry blood at high pressure. Veins carry blood at a low pressure, and capillaries have a lower pressure than the arteries. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. I remember A for arteries and A for away. Veins carry blood back to the heart, and capillaries carry blood through body tissues. Arteries have a small lumen, veins have a large lumen, and capillaries have a tiny lumen. Only one blood cell at a time can fit through that, the lumen, the hole down the middle of the capillary. Arteries have a very thick elastic wall, veins have a thin wall, and then again capillaries much thinner than either of those two. The wall is only 1 cell thick. Arteries don't have any veins. Veins do have valves, and capillaries, they don't have valves either. That's the bit that you need to know for the exam. Is it good? Which of these would be good for vampire feeding? Well, capillaries, I would probably discount straight away because they're so narrow and they're so thin. The blood flow would be really, really slow for the vampire. Would be there for ages. And also they're so tiny. I don't know how good a vampire's eyesight would be. Would they even see them? So then you've got your toss up between your arteries and your veins. As I said, most arteries carry oxygenated blood. So that's blood that's got nice lots of oxygen in it. I'm not sure if that's important. That depends on you if you think that's important for vampires, oxygenated or not. And that blood's at a really, really, really high pressure. So they're going to get lots of blood quite quickly. Again, that could be a good thing for the vampire, not such a good thing at all for the victim. Veins have deoxygenated blood, so that's a blood that doesn't have oxygen in. Again, who knows if vampires are worried about that. You're still going to get quite good blood flow depending on which vein the vampire picks, but not as good. The blood's moving much slower and is at a lower pressure, so probably would be better for the victim. So again, there's no real right or wrong answer there. It's just a nice way to compare blood vessels. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the blood itself. So when people think of blood, they tend to only think of red blood cells, and they think that red blood cells are the main component, or the main thing that makes up blood. But blood is actually made up of plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. And we can see this diagram here. Plasma is the liquid, and then you've got these red blood cells, white blood cells, and these little platelets here that are all floating in this plasma. So we'll talk about the 4 pieces individually now. So if we start with plasma, plasma is actually the main component of your blood. It makes up just over half of your blood, and it's like a palely yellow liquid. So this blood sample in this picture here, it has been put in a centrifuge. That's a machine that spins really, really quickly. And when you do that to blood, it separates out. So we've got the red blood cells here at the bottom, they're the heaviest. Then you've got a thin band made up of your white blood cells and platelets, and then the liquid plasma at the top. That's how we know it's just over half. As I say, that's the liquid bit of your blood. Everything else is carried in the plasma. So the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, they all float in the plasma. And then you have lots of dissolved substances within the plasma itself. Things like all the hormones, most of the waste products, things like urea, which is made down from excess amino acids that are broken down in your body and make up a large part of your urine. Some carbon dioxide will dissolve in the plasma. And then you have all the good stuff as well. So everything from digestion, so amino acids, which we get from proteins, glucose and other sugars, any fat compounds, so like fatty acids and glycerol, they're all going to be dissolved in the plasma. So that can get delivered to your body. Also, antibodies, which are part of your immune system, they're produced by certain white blood cells. They help fight off diseases. So you may have heard of people donating their blood plasma after they have suffered with COVID-19 to help with research and treatment. That's because in the blood plasma, there'll be lots of antibodies for COVID-19, which helps fight COVID-19 in that blood plasma. So if you've heard of people donating your blood plasma and not really sure what that is, that's what it is. They're donating that liquid, that yellowy liquid part of the blood, because the scientists are interested in the antibodies that are carried in the blood plasma. Next bit, the next most common part of your blood, and probably the bit that you've all heard of, are red blood cells. So the job of a red blood cell is to carry oxygen. And to do that, again, they have some special features. So they're called biconcave. So you can sort of see this in the picture. So normally think of a cell as a sphere. Now, actually, cells are lots of different shapes depending on their jobs. And red blood cells, as I say, are biconcave. So by that, we mean they're almost like a donut that hasn't pierced right the way through. So you have a sort of thick outer ring, and then it dips in both sides, on the bottom and in the top, biconcave. And the reason that happens is because it increases the surface area. So it's better for oxygen to diffuse in and out of that red blood cell. Also makes them fit down the capillaries a little bit easier. Unlike a normal cell, red blood cells don't have a nucleus. So nucleuses contain all the DNA of the cell, but once a stem cell differentiates, turns into a red blood cell, part of that process is getting rid of the nucleus. And that's because the nucleus is quite a big part of a cell. And if you get rid of it, again, there's more room to carry oxygen. And the way that red blood cells carry oxygen is with a compound called hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is a protein with some iron in, and that is what carries the oxygen. So your red blood cells will be full of hemoglobin, so it can carry nice lots of oxygen. That's also why some people say that if they've got iron deficient, they can sort of feel quite tired because their blood can't carry as much oxygen. They can't get as much oxygen around their body, and oxygen is needed for respiration and energy release. So that's why. So red blood cells carry oxygen, they're biconcave, they have no nucleus, and they contain lots of hemoglobin. You then have your white blood cells. So I'm not going to talk too much about white blood cells. They're quite a big topic by themselves. And if you've done some study on your immune system already, you might know a bit about white blood cells. If not, when you come on to that, you'll learn a bit more then. So as I say, lots of different types of white blood cells, but their sort of main role in the body is to fight pathogens. So pathogens are any microorganisms that cause disease. And I say one of the ways to do that is they can release something called an antibody, which helps destroy pathogens. And those antibodies are carried in the plasma of your blood. And then the last one, the one that normally most people have never heard of, are platelets. Platelets are really, really important. They form blood clots. This basically stops you bleeding to death. So whenever you get a cut on your body, you've obviously broken a blood vessel there, blood's escaping, and platelets form a web and a mesh to block the hole and stop you bleeding to death, essentially. You might have heard of blood clots in sort of a more negative way. Some people suffer from blood clots. And the problem with that is those blood clots are where they aren't supposed to be. Most things in biology, everything should be sort of a happy medium in biology. So you want blood clots to form and form scabs to stop you bleeding to death. However, you don't want blood clots to form maybe in your heart muscle, where it could cause a heart attack, or anywhere else where it can cause a blockage in a blood vessel. And obviously, you don't want blood clots not to ever form, because then you could get a minor cut, you could bleed to death. So yeah, blood clots are, platelets form blood clots. They are your 4 different types of blood components. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a go at some exam style questions. I've changed some of them slightly to make them a bit Halloweeny, but as I say, these are based on exam questions. Remember, it's roughly 1 mark per minute in science exams. So we've got 2 parts to a question here. One's worth 2 marks and one's worth 3 marks. So urea is a waste product transported in blood plasma. List 2 other substances transported in blood plasma. That's 2 marks, 1 for each thing you get. And then the next one, slightly harder. Athletes can train at high altitudes. Training at high altitudes increase the number of red blood cells in the blood. Explain why an athlete that had trained at high altitudes is more likely to survive a zombie apocalypse. So I'm assuming in a zombie apocalypse, you're going to have to do a lot of running. That's my clue to you there. So say 2 marks for the first question, so maximum of 2 minutes, and then 3 marks for the next question, maximum of 3 minutes. You're going to want to make 3 points in your explanation as to why you think they're more likely to survive a zombie apocalypse. So if you haven't already, you should be moving on to question 2 now. So you've got 1 minute left, guys. Right, so let's go through the answers. So question 1, and it said urea is a waste product carried in blood plasma. Can you list 2 others? So for you can get a mark for any of the ones on the list. So you can have proteins, hormones, antibodies, vitamins, minerals, ions, fatty acid, glycerol, carbon dioxide, water, glucose, amino acids, and lactic acid. Any of those you can get a mark for. If you've got 1 mark out of 2, excellent. If you've got 2 marks out of 2, amazing. Lactic acid, just because we haven't spoken about that in this webinar, that is a waste product of anaerobic respiration. So that's respiration when your cells don't have oxygen. That's the chemical that makes your muscles tired and ache after you've just done like a really fast sprint. Question 2 was athletes can train at high altitudes. Training at high altitudes increases the number of red blood cells in the blood. Explain why an athlete that trained at a high altitude is more likely to survive a zombie apocalypse. So if there are more red blood cells, there's going to be more hemoglobin. Just saying more hemoglobin gets you 1 mark. So that means there's more oxygen can be carried around the body. If you said more oxygen can be carried around the body, more oxygen can be carried, transported, that gets you another mark. So you don't have to have the top mark to get the second mark. If you've just identified the fact that more oxygen's getting carried around, you've got a mark. That oxygen is used by the muscles in respiration or to release more energy. Be really careful that you're not saying produces energy. Respiration releases energy. You can't create or destroy energy. So you have your first mark for saying more hemoglobin, second mark for saying more oxygen can be carried or transported, and then the third mark for saying that oxygen's used for more respiration, more energy is released. Again, in science, don't at all be disheartened if you don't get full marks. If you're picking up 1 or 2 marks on every single question in your science exam, you're going to do really, really well. So if you've got 1 or 2 for that top one, and then you might only have the fact that there's more oxygen in the second one, really well done. Next question. This is a slightly shorter question. So the top question, describe how the structure of an artery is different from the structure of a vein. Now there's a few things you can say on this question. It's only worth 1 mark, however, so only say one thing. And then a vampire compared the taste of blood from an artery and a vein. Compare 2 differences in the composition of the blood. So you need to think about what's in the blood, what's the job of the blood, and then also think about how the blood will be different in an artery. Remember, that's blood coming away from the heart compared to blood that's been around the body and is now coming back to the heart. And that's worth 2 marks. So you're going to have 3 minutes in total. So you've had 1 minute. You should be just finishing the first question and moving on to the second question. So let's go through the answers. So describe how the structure of an artery is different from the structure of a vein. So you could say any of these statements is going to get you a mark, or you could say the reverse. So you could say arteries have thicker walls, or you could say veins have thinner walls. That's going to get you a mark. Arteries don't have valves, or you could say veins have valves. You can say arteries have a smaller lumen, or you could say veins have a larger lumen. Any of those sentences is going to get you a mark. Because it doesn't say compare in the question, but you are essentially comparing how two things are different. You want to try and use words that maybe have an ER on the end. So you shouldn't just say arteries have thick walls. You need to say thicker walls. So you're comparing it to veins. Arteries have thicker walls than veins. And obviously that doesn't work with valves. They either do or they don't have valves. But again, arteries have a smaller lumen or veins have a larger lumen. Shows you're comparing two things. And then again, compare the taste of the blood from an artery and a vein. They give two differences in the composition of the blood. So as I said, arteries are going to have more glucose, and apart from that artery that goes to the lungs, they're going to have more oxygen, more amino acids, more fatty acids, less carbon dioxide, or less lactic acid. So this question was worth 2 marks. So you could pick 2 of those things. Or you could do the reverse. You could say veins have less glucose, less oxygen, less amino acids, less fatty acids, more carbon dioxide, or more lactic acid. Because remember, arteries are taking blood to the rest of your body. So they're going to be carrying all the good stuff that your body needs. So it needs glucose for respiration, it needs oxygen for respiration, and it's going to have things that have been taken from your digestive system. So those amino acids, fatty acids, for example, that your cells need to build new things. And then it's not going to have very many waste products at all. So it's going to have less carbon dioxide, less lactic acid. It should have no urea in it, none of the waste products. Whereas arteries, because they're now coming back from your body, veins, because they're coming back from your body tissues, they're going to have the blood's going to have given up all the good stuff and it's going to have collected all those waste. So it's going to have more carbon dioxide, which is a waste product, more lactic acid potentially if you've just done some sort of a short burst of intense exercise. And obviously hardly any oxygen is given to the cells, hardly any glucose, amino acids and fatty acids, because as all of those things have been delivered to the cells where they are needed. So that's everything I'm going to talk through today. Thanks very much for watching. If you want more on blood and blood vessels, then we can check out, we've got 2 separate lessons on that, on your Frightful teacher, your favourite teacher. If you're really confident with that now, excellent. Perfect. But remember to make sure you're logging on over half term to the website. You're making sure you're ticking complete on those lessons and those topics, and that you're collecting ghosts so you're in a chance to win the prize. I hope you have a lovely half term and a good Halloween. Bye everyone.